The monitoring room beneath the Pacific defense grid was never truly silent. Machines breathed quietly in the dark. Screens glowed in endless rows, each one tracking something different. Satellites, distant probes, deep space listening arrays. Soft blue light reflected off polished floors and the curved glass of consoles. Commander Yara Kessler had spent the last 8 years of her life inside rooms like this. To most people on Earth, the deep signal network didn't even exist. It was buried under layers of secrecy so dense that even most military officials had never heard its name. But the people who worked here understood the truth. Humanity had been listening to the stars for a very long time. Not with hope. With caution. Yara leaned back slightly in her chair, eyes moving across a wall of spectral graphs and signal bands. Thousands of frequencies flowed past her like invisible rivers. Most of them were familiar. Background radiation, distant pulsars, the faint electromagnetic whispers of old satellites drifting through orbit. Routine noise. Predictable noise. But the rule of the deep signal network was simple. The day something unexpected appeared, everything would change. A soft tone chimed beside her console. Yara didn't react immediately. False alerts happened sometimes when solar storms distorted the signal arrays. Still, procedure demanded she check. She tapped the screen. A narrow band of frequency appeared, flickering faintly on the graph. She frowned. "Probably interference," she murmured quietly. The signal was weak, almost buried beneath cosmic noise. But something about it felt wrong. Yara expanded the waveform. The pattern repeated. Perfectly. Her fingers paused above the console. Natural signals rarely repeated with mathematical precision. Pulsars were rhythmic, but this wasn't a pulsar signature. Solar bursts were chaotic. Background radiation was random. But this was structured. Yara leaned forward slowly. The signal repeated again. Same interval. Same pattern. Same spacing between pulses. Her heartbeat quickened. She opened another analysis window and overlaid the cycles. The computer aligned them instantly. Identical. Her chair creaked as she sat upright. "Okay," she whispered. Now she was paying attention. Across the room, a few other analysts worked quietly at their stations, unaware that anything unusual was happening. Most nights inside the monitoring complex passed without a single anomaly. Tonight might be different. Yara increased the sensitivity filters and stripped away layers of cosmic noise. The signal became clearer, rising like a thread pulled from tangled cloth. Pulse. Pause. Pulse. Long pause. Pulse. Her stomach tightened. It wasn't random. It wasn't natural. It was counting. She ran a quick mathematical comparison. Prime numbers. The pulses followed a sequence of primes. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. A universal language. The kind any intelligent species capable of mathematics would recognize. Yara felt the air in the room grow suddenly heavier. Slowly, carefully, she reached toward the red verification key beside her console. The deep signal network had rules. Strict ones. Only 3 types of signals justified escalation to full protocol. Artificial transmission. Extraterrestrial origin. Or structured mathematical communication. The signal currently blinking on her screen might be all 3. Her finger hovered over the key. If she pressed it, dozens of hidden facilities across the planet would activate instantly. Scientists, military commanders, and intelligence officers would wake to alarms in the middle of the night. But if she ignored it, and the signal was real, Yara exhaled slowly. The pulses continued repeating. Clear. Intentional. Impossible to mistake. She pressed the key. The quiet room changed instantly. Red lights flickered across the ceiling. A deep alarm tone echoed through the chamber, low and steady. Analysts looked up from their consoles in confusion. "What's going on?" someone asked. Yara didn't answer immediately. Her eyes were fixed on the growing waveform spreading across the main screen as the system amplified the transmission. More pulses were appearing now. The sequence was expanding. Then something new happened. The pattern shifted. Numbers gave way to blocks of encoded binary. Yara's throat tightened. The signal wasn't just a greeting. It was a message. And somewhere beyond the darkness of space, something had just started talking to Earth. The alarm stopped after 12 seconds. That was all it needed to do. By the time the last echo faded through the monitoring chamber, the deep signal network had already begun waking the rest of the planet. New screens lit across the command center. Data channels opened automatically. Encryption links activated between underground facilities scattered across continents. What had started as a quiet anomaly on Yara Kessler's console was now spreading through an invisible web of analysts, scientists, and military observers. All of them were staring at the same signal. The transmission continued to pulse steadily across the display wall. Prime numbers. The universal mathematical handshake. No one in the room spoke for several seconds. Then someone behind Yara finally whispered the obvious. "That's not natural." Yara didn't turn around. Her fingers were already moving across the keyboard, opening deeper analysis windows as the system began stripping away cosmic interference. "Confirmed," she said calmly. "Signal stability is above 98%. No stellar fluctuation patterns. No known pulsar signatures." Another analyst, a thin man named Alvarez, rolled his chair closer. "Distance estimate." "Working on it." Yara opened a triangulation panel and routed the signal through 3 separate orbital receivers. The system began calculating the angle of arrival based on tiny differences in detection timing. Numbers scrolled rapidly. The room filled with quiet tension. Everyone knew the rule. Mathematics in a repeating broadcast meant intelligence. And intelligence meant contact. But the signal itself was changing. The prime number sequence had stopped. In its place, a stream of structured binary blocks appeared, each one separated by identical pauses. 010011 100 1001 100 10110. Yara isolated the data stream and slowed the playback. "It's structured," she said quietly. Alvarez leaned closer to her screen. "Language? Not yet. It might be an encoding layer." The transmission continued repeating the same packet again and again, like someone trying to ensure the message could be understood no matter who received it. Across the room, the main wall display expanded as the network automatically forwarded the signal to the International Analysis Cluster. Within minutes, additional specialists began appearing on the large holographic conference panel, faces flickering into view from hidden facilities in Europe, Asia, and North America. Some were scientists. Some were military officers. All of them were suddenly awake. A woman from the Geneva Decoding Center spoke first. "Commander Kessler, we're receiving your feed." Yara nodded toward the screen. "Transmission began 7 minutes ago." Repeating mathematical introduction followed by encoded binary. "Origin. Triangulation still processing." Another analyst's voice cut in. Binary segments appear grouped into consistent blocks of 32 bits. The Geneva specialist nodded slowly. "That suggests structured data rather than noise." Yara's console chimed. The triangulation calculation finished. Coordinates appeared. Her stomach tightened slightly as she read them. "Signal source confirmed," she said. "Where?" someone asked. Yara enlarged the map. A thin line stretched across the solar system diagram, extending far beyond the outer planets. Approximately 6 light-years from Earth. The room went quiet again. 6 light-years. Close enough for interstellar communication. Close enough for something to know humanity existed. The Geneva analyst spoke carefully. "Commander, continue decoding." Yara nodded. She fed the binary blocks into the pattern recognition system. The computer scanned for compression structures, translation markers, and mathematical anchors. Nothing. The data didn't match any known encryption. But the repetition suggested something else. The message wasn't hiding. It was teaching. Yara replayed the sequence again, this time isolating the gaps between blocks. "Wait," she murmured. Alvarez leaned forward. "What?" "The pauses." She measured them. Short pause. Long pause. Short pause. Different intervals. "Timing variation," Alvarez said. "Exactly." Yara opened a temporal graph and overlaid the pauses. A pattern appeared. Binary inside binary. The spacing between the data blocks was encoding additional information. Alvarez stared at the graph. That's clever. The system recalculated using the timing layer as a translation key. Suddenly, the binary groups rearranged into a new pattern. Not language. Numbers. Coordinates. Distances. Astronomical references. The signal wasn't just saying hello. It was building a map. Yara watched the emerging diagram slowly assemble itself on the screen. Lines connecting stars, orbital paths forming around distant suns. Someone on the Geneva panel spoke in disbelief. They're showing us their location. But the map didn't stop there. More data blocks appeared. Symbols formed. Structured shapes. A second layer of information began decoding. Alvarez's eyes widened. Commander, I see it. The shapes resolved into something unmistakable. Not stars. Ships. Hundreds of them. Arrayed in formation around the source star. The room fell silent. The signal repeated again. This time the system finished translating the final packet. Words appeared slowly on the central display. Clear. Simple. Unmistakable. Civilization detected. The analysts exchanged uneasy glances. Then the next line appeared. Assessment complete. The final line followed seconds later. And when it appeared, no one in the room spoke at all. Prepare for integration. Yara felt a cold weight settle in her chest. The message continued. One final line. Compliance window, 72 hours. The signal repeated from the beginning. And for the first time since humanity had begun listening to the stars had answered back. With a deadline. For several long seconds after the translation appeared, no one spoke. The message remained on the central display, glowing coldly against the dark wall of the command center. Civilization detected. Assessment complete. Prepare for integration. Compliance window, 72 hours. It repeated every 30 seconds. The deep signal network automatically began recording every fragment, every waveform, every microscopic variation in the broadcast. Backup systems mirrored the data to hidden servers beneath mountains and oceans across the planet. But the message itself didn't change. It didn't need to. The meaning was already clear. Commander Yara Kessler leaned back slowly in her chair, her eyes fixed on the display. Run a verification, she said quietly. Across the room, analysts moved instantly. Redundant decoders activated. Signal paths were checked again through separate satellites and deep space receivers. The result came back within seconds. Signal authenticity confirmed, Alvarez said. Transmission is external. No terrestrial interference. Another voice from the Geneva panel joined in. Language model verification complete. The syntax structure is deliberate. The sender expected the recipient to translate this. Yara nodded slowly. That means they know we're here. More precisely, they had already studied Earth long enough to know humanity could decode the message. The realization settled over the room like a weight. One of the military observers on the conference panel spoke up. Commander Kessler, what exactly does integration mean in this context? Yara didn't answer immediately. She zoomed in on the earlier decoded section, the one that showed the strange star map. The formation of ships appeared again. Hundreds of them. Possibly thousands. The Geneva scientist spoke again, her voice tight with concentration. We've completed translation of the second data layer. Show it, Yara said. The screen changed. Lines of text began appearing beneath the message. Not language exactly, more like categorized statements. A structured declaration. Dominion Authority Protocol. Detected species status. Pre-expansion civilization. Technological tier. Sub-interstellar. Resistance probability. Low. A murmur spread through the analysts. Yara continued reading. Integration directive. Biological and technological assimilation into Dominion network. Someone in the room whispered softly. That doesn't sound like diplomacy. Yara felt the same thought forming in her mind. She scrolled further. The next lines appeared. Standard procedure. Initial contact broadcast. Compliance confirmation. Resource and biological cataloging. Integration deployment. Then the final line appeared beneath it. Non-compliance outcome. Civilizational termination. Silence swallowed the room again. One of the military officers on the conference panel leaned forward. Are we certain that translation is accurate? The Geneva analyst nodded grimly. The grammar structure is extremely simple. It's designed to avoid misunderstanding. Yara looked again at the countdown embedded at the end of the message. 72 hours. A clock had already started ticking somewhere beyond Earth. She opened the astronomical map again. The star system shown in the signal pulsed faintly on the display. 6 light-years away. If the message had traveled at the speed of light, then the transmission had been sent 6 years ago. Alvarez noticed her expression. You're thinking the same thing I am, aren't you? Yara nodded slowly. If they sent this 6 years ago, they might already be on the way. A heavy silence settled across the conference channel. The Geneva scientist spoke carefully. If the fleet shown in the data layer is real, we are looking at a multi-ship interstellar force. How long would it take them to reach us? One of the military observers asked. Yara began calculating. If they possess faster-than-light capability, travel time could be hours. And if they don't, years. No one found that answer comforting, because either possibility was dangerous. The room lights dimmed slightly as the network shifted to emergency communication mode. New faces appeared on the conference panel now. Government representatives, defense coordinators, people who had spent their entire careers preparing for a moment exactly like this. The message played again. Prepare for integration. Compliance window, 72 hours. One of the defense officials spoke. Commander Kessler, based on the signal structure, is there any indication they are expecting a reply? Yara examined the data layers again. There was no obvious communication channel included in the transmission. No return frequency. No handshake protocol. It was less like a conversation, and more like a notice. They aren't asking, she said quietly. They're informing. The message loop restarted again. The countdown continued. 72 hours. 71 hours. 59 minutes. Somewhere across the planet, hidden emergency networks were already activating. Deep beneath oceans. Inside mountain bunkers. Across orbital stations that officially did not exist. Humanity had just received its first message from another civilization. And it wasn't a greeting. It was an ultimatum. 6 light-years from Earth, in orbit around a pale orange star, the command deck of the Dominion flagship Verith Prime was alive with quiet precision. The chamber was enormous, an arc of dark metal and glass stretching nearly 200 meters across. Vast holographic displays floated in the air, showing fleet formations, star charts, and the cold geometry of interstellar navigation. Hundreds of ships waited in formation outside the viewport. Warships, carriers, integration vessels. Their silhouettes formed a metallic constellation against the blackness of space. At the center of the chamber stood Admiral Sorak, Supreme Commander of the 5th Dominion Expansion Fleet. Sorak was tall, his long armored form silhouetted by the soft glow of the tactical displays. His species had evolved under crushing gravity on a world far denser than Earth, giving his frame a strength and rigidity that made even simple movements seem deliberate and controlled. His eyes, deep violet and unblinking, studied the holographic map slowly rotating before him. One star system pulsed in the center of the projection. So, the home of the newly detected civilization. Behind him, an officer approached and bowed slightly. Admiral, the contact transmission has completed. Sorak did not turn. Confirmation of delivery. Yes, Admiral. The message has reached the target civilization. Response. None detected. Sorak nodded slowly. That is expected. He reached forward, expanding the holographic display. The fleet formation spread outward across the projection, hundreds of Dominion vessels arranged with geometric perfection. Each ship had a purpose. Warships to neutralize resistance. Harvest vessels to extract resources. integration ships to catalog and absorb surviving populations. The Dominion had followed the same procedure for centuries. Detect, assess, integrate. Sorak turned at last, addressing the officers gathered around the command deck. Report on species analysis. Another officer stepped forward, activating a secondary projection. Images appeared in the air. Planetary scans. Orbital satellites. Cities glowing on the night side of a blue world. This civilization designates itself humanity, the officer said. Technological analysis confirms sub-interstellar development. Primitive spaceflight capability. Limited planetary defenses. Sorak studied the rotating image of Earth. A small world. Beautiful. Fragile. He had seen thousands like it. Population. Approximately 8 billion individuals. Military capacity. The officer paused. Significant by local planetary standards. However, no evidence of interstellar weapons systems. Sorak folded his arms behind his back. Predictable. Civilizations at this stage always believed they were powerful. They built armies. They constructed fleets. But until a species mastered the vast distances between stars, their power remained trapped inside a single solar system. And a solar system was a very small place. Another officer spoke from the navigation station. Admiral, long-range observation confirms the species has detected the transmission. Sorak allowed himself a faint smile. They will be confused. The officer nodded. Most civilizations are. Sorak walked slowly toward the panoramic viewport at the far end of the command deck. Outside, the Dominion fleet waited patiently. Silent. Perfectly still. Each vessel was larger than the largest structures humanity had ever placed in orbit. They carried technologies the humans could not yet imagine. Faster-than-light drives. Planetary suppression fields. Orbital integration arrays. The Dominion had perfected the art of conquest long before humanity's species had discovered electricity. Sorak spoke quietly. How many civilizations has the Dominion integrated during my command? The tactical officer answered immediately. 37, Admiral. And how many resisted? The officer hesitated only a moment. All of them. Sorak nodded. Yes. Resistance was natural. Young species clung to their independence with predictable desperation. But resistance never changed the outcome. Because the Dominion did not conquer through chaos. It conquered through certainty. Every integration followed the same pattern. First contact. Assessment. Compliance window. If the species accepted integration peacefully, the process proceeded smoothly. If they resisted, the Dominion simply removed the problem. Sorak returned his gaze to the holographic display of Earth. Cities shimmered across the planet's surface like clusters of fragile light. 8 billion lives. 8 billion potential additions to the Dominion network. Or 8 billion casualties. The outcome depended entirely on the decision the humans made during the next 72 hours. One of the junior officers spoke hesitantly. Admiral, this species shows signs of unusual social cooperation. Their planetary networks are highly interconnected. Sorak raised an eyebrow. Explain. They possess a global communication web allowing instant information exchange across their entire world. Sorak considered this. Many civilizations reach similar levels before integration. Yes, Admiral. But their technological growth curve appears irregular. Define irregular. The officer adjusted the display. Graphs appeared, showing centuries of human technological progress. Sudden spikes. Rapid advancements. Periods of explosive development. Sorak studied the data silently. Volatile, he said. Correct. Does this volatility present a threat? The officer shook his head. No, Admiral. Their current capabilities remain far below Dominion technology. Sorak turned away from the display. Then the matter was settled. Humanity would follow the same path as every species before them. Confusion. Fear. Then compliance. Because in the end, every civilization understood the same truth. The Dominion always won. Sorak looked once more at the distant star labeled Sol. "Prepare the fleet." "Yes, Admiral." The officer bowed. Sorak's voice remained calm and absolute. "We will arrive when their compliance window expires." He paused briefly. "Begin final approach calculations." Across the command deck, hundreds of Dominion officers began working simultaneously. Navigation arrays activated. Engines warmed. Coordinates locked. 6 light-years away, a small blue world was waiting for them. And Admiral Sorak was certain of one thing. When the Dominion arrived, humanity would surrender. 3 hours after the signal was decoded, the world should have been in chaos. It wasn't. No emergency broadcasts interrupted television channels. No governments issued public warnings. No global panic spread across the internet. Across Earth, billions of people slept peacefully, completely unaware that an alien civilization had just delivered an ultimatum. But deep beneath the surface of the planet, things were moving very quickly. In a heavily shielded conference chamber beneath the United Nations complex in Geneva, a circular table of dark metal slowly filled with silent figures. Some appeared in person. Others were projected as full-scale holograms from secure facilities scattered across the globe. Military commanders, scientific directors, intelligence chiefs. And at the far end of the table, Commander Yara Kessler stood quietly, watching them arrive one by one. A large screen above the chamber displayed the message that had started everything. "Prepare for integration. Compliance window, 72 hours. The countdown now read. 68 hours remaining." A man with silver hair and sharp eyes leaned forward slightly. Director Halvorsen of the Planetary Defense Coordination Council. "So," he said calmly, "it finally happened." His voice carried none of the panic one might expect from someone hearing that an alien empire planned to conquer Earth. Instead, it sounded almost inevitable. Yara noticed the same reaction around the room. No shock. No disbelief. Only focused attention. She realized something then. These people had been waiting for this moment far longer than she had. Halvorsen gestured toward her. "Commander Kessler, your report." Yara nodded and activated the central display. "The transmission originated from a star system approximately 6 light-years from Earth," she began. "The sender identifies itself as the Dominion. Based on decoded data layers, they operate a large multi-ship interstellar fleet." The holographic star map appeared above the table. Dozens of ship signatures formed a massive cluster around the Dominion home system. Yara continued. "The message describes a standard integration protocol. Civilizations are given a 72-hour compliance window before forced assimilation." A general seated across the table asked the obvious question. "What happens if we refuse?" Yara changed the display. The final line of the decoded message appeared. "Non-compliance outcome, civilizational termination." The general nodded slowly. "Direct. Efficient." Halvorsen folded his hands on the table. "Estimated arrival time?" "We don't know," Yara said. "If they possess faster-than-light travel, they could reach our system at any moment." Another voice joined the conversation. Professor Lena Okoye, chief astrophysicist for the Deep Signal Network. "Based on the signal's age, the transmission was sent 6 years ago." Halvorsen's eyes narrowed slightly. "So the fleet may already be moving." "Yes." Silence settled across the chamber again. Finally, Halvorsen leaned back in his chair. "Well," he said quietly, "then it seems our guests are right on schedule." Yara blinked. "Right on schedule?" A military officer beside her spoke calmly. "Director, should we initiate public disclosure?" Halvorsen shook his head. "Not yet." He stood slowly and walked toward the central display. The image of the Dominion fleet hovered above the table. Hundreds of ships. Perhaps thousands. To an ordinary observer, the image might have looked terrifying. To Halvorsen, it looked familiar. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said quietly, "we have spent the last 4 centuries preparing for exactly this scenario." Yara felt a small chill run down her spine. 4 centuries. Halvorsen turned toward the room. "Commander Kessler's team has done excellent work confirming the signal's authenticity. The Dominion believes humanity is a primitive species on the verge of interstellar development. A faint smile appeared on his face. That assumption is useful. A general across the table leaned forward. Are we certain this is the same species identified in the archive? Professor Okoye nodded. The signal architecture matches the ancient data fragments recovered from the Kuiper object. Yara's head turned quickly. Wait, she said. Ancient fragments. Several people in the room glanced toward her. Halvorsen noticed the confusion in her expression. Commander, he said gently, how much do you know about the archive discovery? Yara hesitated. Very little, sir. The files were classified beyond my clearance. Halvorsen nodded slowly. That makes sense. Only a few hundred people on Earth are aware of the full details. He paused for a moment. Then he activated another holographic projection. A small object appeared in the air above the table. Dark. Angular. Alien. Yara stared at it. What is that? Halvorsen's voice remained calm. That, he said, is the reason humanity has been preparing for the Dominion for the last 400 years. The room grew very quiet. Yara studied the object carefully. It didn't look like any human spacecraft. The surface was made of a strange black material that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. Ancient. Damaged. But unmistakably artificial. Halvorsen continued. In 1621, an astronomical survey detected a small object drifting through the outer solar system. It was eventually captured and brought to Earth. Yara felt her heart beating faster. And it wasn't natural, she said. No, Halvorsen replied. It was a probe. The room fell completely silent. Halvorsen looked around the table. And inside that probe, humanity found the first evidence that the Dominion existed. Yara slowly realized what he meant. The Dominion thought they had just discovered Earth. But Earth had discovered them centuries earlier. Halvorsen folded his hands behind his back. The Dominion believes they are arriving to conquer an unprepared world. He looked at the countdown still ticking above the table. 67 hours remaining. Let them keep believing that. For several seconds after Halvorsen spoke, no one moved. Commander Yara Kessler stared at the floating image of the ancient probe above the conference table. Its dark, jagged shape rotated slowly in the air, illuminated by thin blue lines from the projection system. A Dominion probe. 400 years old. Yara finally found her voice. You're telling me, she said carefully, that humanity has known about this alien civilization since the 17th century? Halvorsen nodded once. Not the entire civilization, he said. But enough. He expanded the holographic projection. New images appeared beside the probe, old diagrams, research notes, early reconstructions of alien technology. History remembers the early 17th century for exploration, Halvorsen continued. Sailing ships, new continents, the beginnings of scientific revolution. He paused. But hidden beneath those events was a discovery that changed the course of human history. The probe rotated again. Professor Okoye stepped forward and continued the explanation. The object was detected by early astronomical observations in 1621. At first it was assumed to be a comet fragment moving through the outer solar system. She enlarged the display, revealing a map of the probe's trajectory. But its motion was wrong, she said. Too controlled. Too deliberate. Yara studied the pathline carefully. It wasn't drifting. It had been steering. Okoye continued. By 1643, a coalition of scientists and governments managed to intercept it using experimental rocketry and gravitational capture. Yara's eyebrows rose. In the 17th century, Halvorsen gave a faint smile. History books sometimes leave things out. The probe's surface opened in the holographic reconstruction, revealing its interior. Strange geometric structures filled the core. Machines unlike anything humanity had ever built. Inside the probe, Okoye said quietly, we discovered a vast archive of data fragments. What kind of data? Yara asked. Observational records. Navigation charts. Biological surveys. Halvorsen finished the sentence. and conquest logs. The room felt colder somehow. Yara's eyes returned to the display. Conquest. Halvorsen nodded slowly. The Dominion had been cataloging civilizations across the galaxy for centuries. The probe was part of a long-range reconnaissance network. Images appeared in the air. Alien worlds. Strange cities. Civilizations that no longer existed. The probe contained records of dozens of species, Okoye said. Each one discovered, studied, then integrated into the Dominion. Yara stared at the images. Some worlds were beautiful. Some were already ruined. How many survived? She asked. Okoye didn't answer immediately. Then she said quietly, "None." Silence filled the chamber again. Halvorsen folded his arms behind his back. The Dominion follows a predictable pattern. They discover a civilization, evaluate its technological level, and then arrive with overwhelming force. Yara nodded slowly. Like the message we just received. Exactly. He gestured to the probe. 400 years ago, humanity realized two things. He raised a finger. First, we were not alone. A second finger joined the first. Second, eventually, they would find us. Yara felt the weight of that realization. People centuries ago had discovered proof of an alien empire. And instead of panicking, they had prepared. Halvorsen activated another display. A timeline stretched across the air. 1621, probe detected 1643, probe captured 1700s, early reverse engineering 1800s, energy research expansion 1900s, orbital infrastructure development 2000s, deep space defense grid established. Yara's eyes widened slightly. You built the deep signal network because of this? Yes. And the orbital defense arrays? Halvorsen nodded again. And many other things. The timeline continued. Several entries were still classified. But one line stood out clearly. 2047, Integration Countermeasure Program. Yara pointed at it. What's that? Halvorsen looked at her for a moment. Then he smiled faintly. That, he said, is the project that will surprise the Dominion. Professor Okoye added another image to the display. A vast network of structures appeared around the solar system. Hidden installations near the asteroid belt. Energy platforms orbiting distant moons. Sensor grids stretching far beyond Pluto. All of it built slowly, she explained. Carefully. Quietly. So no one would notice, Yara said. Exactly. The Dominion probe had revealed something critical about their strategy. They attacked civilizations that appeared weak. Primitive. Unprepared. So humanity had spent centuries doing something very unusual. Pretending to be exactly that. Halvorsen walked back to the center of the table. The Dominion believes they discovered Earth only recently. He looked around the room. They believe humanity is a young civilization that barely understands space. A faint smile crossed several faces at the table. They believe, Halvorsen continued, that we will panic. The countdown timer hovered above them. 64 hours remaining. Yara finally understood the strange calm she had sensed when the meeting began. Humanity wasn't scrambling to prepare. Humanity had already finished preparing. Halvorsen looked once more at the rotating image of the Dominion fleet. Let them come. 62 hours after the Dominion message arrived, the waiting ended. Far beyond the orbit of Pluto, in the silent darkness at the edge of the solar system, space itself bent inward. For a fraction of a second the stars warped, stretching into thin lines of light as gravity twisted unnaturally around a single point. Then the distortion collapsed outward like a ripple across a black ocean. Something enormous emerged. The first Dominion warship appeared without sound, its massive armored hull sliding into normal space like a blade cutting through water. Moments later, more distortions erupted around it. Another warship. Then another. And another. Within seconds, the darkness beyond Pluto filled with ships. Hundreds of them. Each vessel dwarfed the largest spacecraft humanity had ever publicly constructed. Long armored structures stretched for kilometers, their surfaces glowing faintly with the energy fields that had carried them across interstellar space. The Dominion 5th Expansion Fleet had arrived. Inside the flagship Verith Prime, Admiral Sorak stood before the vast observation viewport as the final ships completed their transition from faster-than-light travel. Navigation reports flowed across the command displays. Fleet arrival confirmed. Gravitational stability nominal. Local star system identified. The holographic map of the solar system expanded across the command deck. A small yellow star. 8 planets. A scattering of asteroids. Primitive. Predictable. Sorak studied the map calmly. Target world. A navigation officer pointed to the third planet. Sol 3. Local designation, Earth. The blue world appeared on the projection. Clouds drifted across its surface. Vast oceans reflected sunlight back into space. Thin rings of artificial satellites orbited the planet, tiny glimmers of technology around an otherwise natural world. Sorak watched silently. Any sign of organized defense? The tactical officer scanned the system. Minimal orbital infrastructure detected. Several hundred small satellites. A few low-orbit stations. No fleets. No planetary shields. No large-scale energy signatures. The officer looked up. This civilization appears technologically primitive. Sorak nodded once. Expected. Another officer spoke from the communications console. Admiral, the compliance window expires in 9 hours. Sorak turned slightly. Any reply from the species? None detected. Sorak considered this. Silence could mean several things. Fear, confusion, or simple disbelief. He had seen all three reactions countless times before. Young civilizations rarely understood the scale of the forces about to descend upon them. Sorak activated a wider scan of the solar system. His ships had arrived at the outer edge, far from the inner planets where humanity lived. It was standard Dominion protocol. Enter quietly, observe briefly, then move inward when the compliance window expired. The scan results appeared across the tactical display. Gas giants. Rocky planets. Asteroid belts. No unusual military signatures. Nothing capable of challenging a Dominion fleet. The tactical officer nodded. System security assessment complete. Threat level minimal. Sorak looked once more at the blue planet. 8 billion inhabitants. An entire civilization unaware that hundreds of warships now hovered silently at the edge of their system. He had conquered worlds with populations far greater. Planets with far more advanced technology. Earth would be uncomplicated. Begin approach maneuver, Sorak ordered. The navigation officer hesitated slightly. Admiral, approach now. The compliance window has not yet expired. Sorak's expression remained calm. They have not responded. Yes, Admiral. Then their silence is answer enough. He turned toward the fleet projection. Move the fleet to inner system observation distance. Hundreds of Dominion ships activated their engines simultaneously. The fleet began drifting slowly inward toward the heart of the solar system, unaware that thousands of hidden sensors had already detected their arrival. Hidden listening posts scattered across the Kuiper Belt quietly transmitted data back toward Earth. Deep inside the command chamber beneath Geneva, Commander Yara Kessler watched the incoming fleet appear on the tactical display. Red markers filled the holographic map. Hundreds of them. More ships than humanity had ever imagined facing at once. But instead of panic, the room remained calm. Professor Okoye studied the data feed carefully. FTL exit signatures matched the Dominion probe archives. Halvorsen nodded. Estimated fleet size? Approximately 400 warships, Okoye replied. Plus integration vessels. A general beside her exhaled slowly. They brought their entire invasion force. Halvorsen looked at the countdown timer. 8 hours remaining. Perfect, he said quietly. Yara glanced at him. You're pleased. Halvorsen smiled faintly. The larger the fleet, the more convincing our deception becomes. Yara turned back toward the tactical display. The Dominion fleet was moving inward now. Toward the inner planets. Toward Earth. Across the room, a young analyst spoke nervously. They're scanning the system. Halvorsen nodded. Of course they are. Should we activate the outer defense grid? Not yet. Yara frowned slightly. Why not? Halvorsen looked at the Dominion fleet markers slowly approaching the asteroid belt. Because, he said calmly, right now they still believe we are helpless. He tapped the console beside him. And we want them to keep believing that. Just a little longer. The Dominion fleet crossed the orbit of Neptune 3 hours before the compliance window expired. From Admiral Sorak's perspective, the solar system continued to look exactly as expected. Quiet. Underdeveloped. Defenseless. Primitive sensor satellites floated through orbit around the planets. A few weak radar emissions pulsed from the inner system. None of it resembled the military infrastructure of a species capable of resisting interstellar conquest. The fleet moved inward in perfect formation. 400 warships sliding through space like a metallic tide. On the command deck of Verith Prime, Sorak studied the approaching inner planets through the tactical display. Planetary defense activity. The sensor officer answered without hesitation. Minimal. Orbital infrastructure around Sol 3 remains unchanged. No large-scale power signatures detected. Sorak nodded. The humans were either terrified or unaware. Both outcomes simplified the integration process. The fleet continued its silent advance. Behind them, the dark outer reaches of the solar system faded into distance. Ahead, the bright light of the inner planets grew stronger. And then something happened. A sensor alert chimed across the command deck. The officer paused. Admiral, detecting gravitational fluctuations. Sorak turned. Source. Unknown. The officer expanded the sensor feed. Small distortions were appearing across the tactical map, tiny ripples in the gravitational field surrounding the fleet. Sorak frowned slightly. Natural phenomenon. The officer shook his head. No known stellar activity in this region. Another alarm sounded. Then another. Across the Dominion fleet, sensors began reporting the same anomaly. Gravitational disturbances. Energy spikes. But there were still no visible ships. Sorak's voice sharpened slightly. Full spectrum scan. The tactical display widened, scanning deeper into the asteroid belt ahead of them. For a moment, nothing appeared. Then the sensor filters adjusted, and the hidden structures revealed themselves. Thousands of them. Dark installations buried within asteroids. Long metallic frameworks disguised beneath layers of rock. Gigantic energy collectors spread across entire clusters of asteroids. The officer stared in disbelief. Admiral. Sorak stepped closer to the display. What is it? The officer swallowed. Artificial structures. Thousands of them. The holographic map filled rapidly with new icons. Each one representing something that had been hidden in the solar system for centuries. Energy platforms. Weapon arrays. Navigation disruption nodes. Sorak's eyes narrowed. How long have these been here? The officer's voice was tight. Based on corrosion patterns, centuries. For the first time since arriving in the system, Sorak felt a flicker of unease. Before he could speak again, every hidden installation activated at once. Across the asteroid belt, enormous reactors surged to life. Power grids that had been dormant for decades roared awake. The solar system lit up. On Earth, Commander Yara Kessler watched the same moment unfold on the Defense Network display. Thousands of green lights appeared across the map. The integration countermeasure grid had activated. Professor Okoye spoke calmly. Outer disruption network online. A general beside her added. Navigation interference fields charging. Halvorsen simply nodded. Good. Back on the Dominion flagship, alarms exploded across the command deck. Admiral, our navigation systems are experiencing interference. Gravitational distortion increasing. FTL drives unable to initialize. Sorak turned sharply. Explain. The tactical officer pulled up the system diagnostics. The asteroid installations are generating overlapping gravity wells. Sorak's eyes widened slightly. Artificial gravity? Yes, Admiral. Purpose? The officer hesitated. Then the answer became obvious. They're trapping us. Across the fleet, Dominion warships attempted to reposition. But the gravitational field surrounding the asteroid belt had already formed a massive cage. Hundreds of artificial wells pulled against each other, creating a tangled web of warped space. Every escape vector collapsed under conflicting gravitational forces. The Dominion fleet slowed, then stopped. FTL drives could not engage inside unstable gravity fields. Normal engines struggled to move against the distortions. They had entered a trap designed specifically for interstellar fleets. Sorak stared at the tactical map. This system was prepared. The realization settled slowly across the command deck. The humans had known. 4 centuries. A communications officer shouted suddenly. Admiral! Incoming transmission from Sol 3. Sorak turned. On screen, the display shifted. Instead of a warship, a simple communication signal appeared. A calm human voice filled the command deck. This is the planetary defense network of Earth. Sorak listened silently. You have entered restricted space within the Sol system. Your fleet is currently inside a gravitational containment grid. The voice remained steady. You cannot engage faster-than-light travel within this field. The tactical officer confirmed quietly. They're correct. The human voice continued. For the safety of both civilizations, we recommend you remain stationary while negotiations begin. Sorak stood motionless. Behind him, hundreds of Dominion warships struggled against the invisible cage surrounding them. 4 centuries of human preparation had just sprung shut. And the Dominion fleet was caught in the center of it. The Dominion fleet had conquered dozens of civilizations. Entire star systems had fallen before their arrival. But never, not once in the history of the Dominion, had a fleet been stopped before the first battle even began. Inside the command deck of Verith Prime, the alarms had faded into a tense silence. Every officer stared at the tactical display. 400 Dominion warships, trapped. The artificial gravity grid surrounding the asteroid belt pulsed steadily, its overlapping fields twisting space itself into a cage no faster-than-light drive could escape. Admiral Sorak stood motionless, studying the map. The trap was elegant, simple, and terrifyingly effective. The human transmission repeated again through the command speakers. This is the planetary defense network of Earth. For the safety of both civilizations, we recommend you remain stationary while negotiations begin. Sorak's tactical officer spoke quietly. Admiral, propulsion systems remain functional, but escape vectors are collapsing faster than we can calculate them. Another officer added, Our FTL drives cannot form a stable corridor. The gravity distortions disrupt the field geometry. Sorak nodded slowly. He understood what the humans had done. Interstellar fleets depended on stable gravitational conditions to engage faster-than-light drives. The humans had built a web of artificial gravity generators powerful enough to corrupt the geometry of space itself. Within that web, no ship could leave. And the Dominion fleet had flown directly into the center of it. Sorak turned to the communications officer. Respond. The officer activated the channel. Sorak spoke calmly. This is Admiral Sorak of the Dominion 5th Expansion Fleet. For a moment, there was only silence on the channel. Then the human voice returned. Admiral Sorak, welcome to the Sol system. The voice was calm, polite, almost welcoming. Sorak continued. You claim to control this gravitational containment field. That is correct. You are aware that your civilization is technologically inferior to the Dominion. A short pause followed. Then the human voice answered. Yes. The response was so simple that several Dominion officers glanced at each other. Sorak narrowed his eyes slightly. If that is true, you understand that the Dominion fleet could still destroy your planet. The human voice returned immediately. Yes. Another calm answer. No fear. No hesitation. Sorak felt the first true flicker of curiosity. Then why trap us? This time, the pause lasted longer. When the human voice spoke again, it sounded almost thoughtful. Because destroying your fleet was never our objective. Sorak folded his arms behind his back. Explain. Across the solar system, hidden defense platforms shifted position. Thousands of energy collectors began drawing power from the sun. But none of them fired. On Earth, Commander Yara Kessler listened to the exchange carefully. Halvorsen stood beside her, watching the Dominion fleet struggle against the gravitational cage. Yara spoke quietly. "They're waiting for us to attack." Halvorsen nodded. "That's what they expect." Yara looked back at the screen. "But we're not going to." "No." He smiled faintly. "We're going to show them something else." Back aboard Verith Prime, the human voice continued. "Admiral Sorak, your probe reached our solar system 400 years ago." Sorak's expression hardened slightly. "Our probe?" "Yes. We recovered it in the 17th century." Several Dominion officers turned toward Sorak in surprise. The human voice continued calmly. "For 4 centuries, humanity studied the Dominion." Images suddenly appeared on the Dominion tactical display. Alien worlds. Dominion fleets. Destroyed civilizations. The same conquest records that had once been stored inside the ancient probe. "We know your expansion pattern," the voice said. "We know your strategy. We know what happens to civilizations that resist." Sorak watched silently. The humans had learned far more than he expected. The voice continued. "That is why we built the gravitational containment grid. Not to destroy you, but to prove something." Sorak spoke again. "And what is that?" Across the solar system, thousands of human installations shifted into a new configuration. The gravitational cage tightened slightly. But still, no weapons fired. The human voice answered calmly. "That humanity is not the civilization you expected to find." Another transmission appeared on the Dominion displays. A massive network of structures surrounding the entire solar system. Defense stations. Energy platforms. Hidden fleets. Centuries of preparation. Sorak studied the data. The humans had done something remarkable. Instead of rushing into interstellar expansion, they had spent centuries turning their entire solar system into a fortress. The voice continued. "We could destroy your fleet, Admiral. And you know that now." The Dominion tactical officer quietly confirmed the obvious. "Admiral, if their energy grid activates, our fleet would not survive." Sorak remained silent. The human voice spoke one final time. "But we do not wish to begin a war between civilizations." A new message appeared on the Dominion display. A simple offer. Cease hostile expansion. Open diplomatic contact. Leave the Sol system peacefully. The voice finished calmly. "Humanity does not wish to conquer the galaxy. We simply refuse to be conquered." For the first time in centuries of command, Admiral Sorak realized something astonishing. The Dominion had arrived expecting submission. Instead, they had encountered a civilization that had spent 400 years preparing to say no. For a long time, Admiral Sorak said nothing. The command deck of Verith Prime had fallen completely silent. Hundreds of Dominion officers watched the tactical displays, their expressions tight with disbelief. The humans had not fired a single weapon. And yet the Dominion fleet was trapped. Sorak studied the map of the solar system again. Thousands of hidden installations surrounded the asteroid belt like a massive web of steel and energy. The gravitational containment grid pulsed steadily, its overlapping fields twisting space itself into an invisible cage. Every Dominion ship remained inside it. Every escape route was closed. 400 warships, an entire expansion fleet, stopped without a battle. Sorak finally spoke. "Tactical assessment." The officer beside him hesitated before answering. "If the human energy grid activates fully, our fleet will be destroyed." Sorak nodded once. It was not fear he felt. It was something far rarer. Respect. Across the command deck, the human transmission remained open. The same calm voice waited patiently for his answer. Sorak stepped closer to the communication console. "This is Admiral Sorak." A moment later the reply came. We are listening. Sorak looked at the projection of Earth rotating slowly on the display. A small world. Young. But no longer helpless. You claim you have studied the Dominion for 4 centuries. That is correct. You claim your civilization does not wish war. That is also correct. Sorak considered the offer displayed on the screen. Cease hostile expansion. Open diplomatic contact. Leave the Sol system peacefully. The Dominion had never accepted such terms before. For centuries, their fleets had expanded without resistance strong enough to challenge them. But this civilization had done something unprecedented. They had prepared. Quietly. Patiently. And when the Dominion arrived, they had revealed that preparation all at once. Sorak turned to his officers. Fleet readiness. Combat systems operational. FTL drives. Still locked by the containment grid. Sorak nodded slowly. The Dominion fleet could fight. But victory was no longer certain. And if the humans destroyed the fleet, the Dominion would lose far more than ships. They would lose the illusion that their expansion was unstoppable. Sorak returned his gaze to the communications display. You said your objective was not destruction, he said. Yes. Then why reveal your full defenses now? The human voice answered calmly. Because the galaxy deserves to know the truth. Sorak frowned slightly. What truth? Across the Dominion command deck, every display suddenly changed. New signals appeared across the communication network. Powerful. Wideband. Broadcasting across enormous distances. The Dominion communications officer reacted instantly. Admiral, the humans are transmitting on interstellar frequencies. To whom? The officer's voice tightened. Everyone. The human voice continued. For 4 centuries, humanity studied the data stored in your probe. Images appeared again on the screens. But this time they were not being shown only to the Dominion fleet. They were being transmitted outward into deep space. Records. Footage. Historical logs of Dominion conquests. Dozens of civilizations discovered and erased. Entire worlds integrated into the Dominion network. The voice spoke steadily. Your empire believed these records were lost when the probe failed. Sorak's expression darkened slightly. But he already understood what the humans were doing. They weren't lost, the voice continued. We kept them. Across the galaxy, the broadcast spread from relay station to relay station. Human listening posts deep in space repeated the signal again and again, pushing it farther into the stars. Alien civilizations that had once lived in fear of the Dominion were suddenly receiving something new. Proof. Proof that the Dominion could be stopped. Proof that one civilization had already done it. Back on Earth, Commander Yara Kessler watched the transmission expand outward across the deep space network. Professor Okoye nodded quietly beside her. Signal relays functioning. Halvorsen folded his arms. Good. The human voice continued through the Dominion flagship speakers. We are not declaring war on the Dominion. We are simply ending the silence. Sorak understood. For centuries, the Dominion had conquered worlds one by one. Isolated. Alone. Now the humans had broken that isolation. The galaxy would know what the Dominion had done. And more importantly, the galaxy would know the Dominion was not invincible. Sorak looked at the tactical map one last time. His fleet remained trapped. But the humans had chosen restraint instead of annihilation. A curious decision. One he could respect. He turned to the communications officer. Transmit fleet-wide command. Yes, Admiral. Sorak spoke clearly. All Dominion vessels, power down primary weapons. The officers stared at him in shock. But none disobeyed. One by one, across the trapped fleet, weapon systems deactivated. Sorak turned back to the human channel. This is Admiral Sorak of the Dominion. We accept your terms. Across the solar system, the gravitational grid remained active. But no weapons fired. The human voice responded quietly. Thank you, Admiral. Sorak allowed himself the faintest smile. For the first time in many centuries, he said, The Dominion has discovered a civilization worth speaking to. The transmission ended. Far beyond the solar system, the human broadcast continued spreading through the galaxy. Worlds that had once believed the Dominion unstoppable were hearing the truth. Humanity had not conquered the stars. Humanity had done something far more difficult. They had stood their ground. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy realized it no longer had to face the Dominion alone.